Good evening and happy new year to all of our listeners. This is Why Politics Matters here on Salam Radio, and I'm very, very pleased to be back here with my co-host Alex Blower. Alex, welcome back.
Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Alex Blower and myself, Imtiaz Ali, here on Why Politics Matters. We had a fantastic show with some really good feedback at the back end of last year on nationalisation, privatisation, and we thought that was going to be a bit of a dry topic, but actually so many things to discuss around that topic, and we had a lot of interaction from our listeners. Today, I feel like we've got something that's a lot more closer to home. I think something that pretty much everybody can relate to, regardless of how well insulated you might feel you are. We're talking about the cost of living crisis.
And it's not something that any of us are going to get away from soon, is it?
No, it's not. It's been a talking point for pretty much, in the news, I'd say maybe the last 6 to 9 months, but something that I think pretty much everyone's been aware of for about 24 months, probably even more. And I feel like bringing in the B word already, Brexit, it's probably a bit early in the discussion, but, what are your thoughts on how, firstly, how we're being sold the cost of living crisis? What do you think the media's portrayal of it and what our reaction should be to this cost of living crisis?
Well, first of all, with anything that the media or the government tell us, that I'll always be an advocate for critically analysing it and questioning it in the best way that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And when we have a look at the cost of living and what the narratives around it being, you're quite right to mention Brexit. There's certainly been some discussion as that being part of the reasoning. But I'd say really the excuses we're being given can be split into the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yeah, Russia-Ukraine is definitely responsible for the cost of living, yeah,
apparently. So we're being told, yep, but we'll have a look at some of the figures around that momentarily. Brexit, as you say, and of course, COVID crisis as well. So, if we have a look at Brexit, first of all, the cost of living crisis isn't just affecting us here in the United Kingdom. So for me, that kind of takes that one out of the equation. It is a problem which is affecting us all in the West. Certainly the more capitalist and the more neoliberal the country is, the more it seems to be affecting the average low-income, average-income family and household. Unless anybody out there has got anything else to put in with Brexit, or unless you have, I feel that we can actually just put a solid line right through that one.
You said a lot of long words there. Neoliberal countries. What do you mean by that?
Well, the countries that are most entrenched in the capitalist dynamic,
right, so I get
of
that.
Free market, of money, of push, of corporations being looked after, and that the economy must be protected.
Yeah.
After all, that's what we're all here for, isn't it?
The only reason you are alive is to protect corporate interests.
That's why I was born.
The sooner you realise that, the better for you. So let me try and break this down then. So we're talking about, you said war in Ukraine, and you said Brexit, and you said, what was the third thing you said? COVID, right, okay. Let's deal with them in reverse order. But before we do, so we're going to deal with those in reverse order. But before we do, the cost of living crisis, what are the costs of living? So let's break those down. For an average person, what are the essential costs that you have to deal with before you get an opportunity to spend money on things that you actually want? Because if I want to go on a holiday, that's not a cost of living, is it?
Absolutely not.
Holiday is not a cost of living. If I want an extra caramel macchiato, then that's not a cost of living. That's deemed to be a luxury good. Yep. Something I can choose to do with my disposable income after expenses. If I need to pay rent, that's cost of living.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because if without paying rent, I've not got a house, or if I'm without paying a mortgage, I don't have a house. Okay, food, cost of living.
Cost of living, yes.
Energy, cost of living. Telecommunications, broadband, the kind of things we talked about we should probably be nationalising in the last show.
Again, cost of living, your health, cost of living, and your transport.
So health, I would say NHS, taxation, education, again, taxation. So let's break this down. So you've got tax, you've got food, you've got shelter, and then you've got energy. Is that fair?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Tax rates. So they've gone up.
Let's leave them. I'd like to put tax at the bottom of the list if I can, because I've actually got a theory all around the cost of living and why it's being affected, which actually boils down to tax.
Yeah. Okay, let's come to that last.
If we may.
Food, I think food and shelter, we could probably come back to them a little bit later. Energy is the big one, isn't it?
Okay.
Energy is the one that's really been in the news for a long, long time.
Now, and that's also one which has been directly associated with the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Right, okay.
Yep. Russia are suppliers to many countries of gas and oil, and we're told that that's going to influence the cost that we're paying here at home. So again, let's have a look at that. How much do we take from Russia? Well, actually, only 9% of our oil and only 4% of our gas is from Russia.
So very small proportions in terms of the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And if you say, we lose somebody that supplies us with, let's say, 10% of our energy, then energy prices should go up 10%, roughly. It's not one-to-one, but it's a rough
I'm certainly not an economist, so I can't make that argument. But what I would say is that we do have a strategic supply network. Russia is not our only supplier. They only supply 9%. And the specialists in this area actually suggest that anything less than 5% should not affect us economically whatsoever, because we have a diverse supply network.
Yeah.
If we lose supply from one place, we can up our orders from other places, whether it be Venezuela, Canada, or many, many others.
Sure.
But again, let's look at the cost of oil. Price per barrel is currently less than what it was pre-COVID prices.
So explain to me like I'm a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Because surely if demand increases, prices go up. The whole argument is we're no longer trading with Russia because of what they're doing in Ukraine. We're no longer able to trade with Ukraine because of the war. So there's less supply because of that, and there's the same demand from outside countries. So the demand to supply ratio has gone up. Prices should go up. But you're saying the opposite. You're saying prices have come down, price per barrel of oil. And we've seen it at the fuel stations. We were paying £1.90 per litre of petrol or diesel, and now it's down to 1.75. So prices have come down. So that almost shoots that argument out of the water, doesn't it?
I feel.
Yeah?
I don't see why they went up in the first place. Well, I do, but we'll get to that, the reasoning why this. I mean, if we can't pick it out from what they're telling us, then there has to be another reason behind it, doesn't there?
Okay. So let's have a brief chat about the cost of energy then. So there were pre-agreed contracts signed between the government and the energy providers that there was going to be a price cap that expired April 2022.
Yeah.
Those contracts were signed 5 years ago. So for 5 years, we knew that the prices were going to go up. For 5 years, we didn't know that Russia was going to invade the Ukraine. So them saying the war in Ukraine has led to your energy prices going up, it's just a complete lie.
It was certainly convenient timing, if nothing else, though,
It was
wasn't
convenient timing, but you've got these signed contracts. Like, people know. We were warned that energy prices were going to go up because the price cap that the government has agreed with these energy companies has been in place for a number of years, and it's going to expire, and there's no new price cap. And we were told that our prices were going to double, if not treble, over the next 6, 9, 12 months. So for the prices to go up was absolutely zero surprise, and there was no way you could allocate that to the war in Ukraine. The only issue I have is the messaging around that. So why are we being told that the war in Ukraine is causing your gas bill to go up? Why are we being told that when it's blatantly false? It's a lie.
Okay, so give me a minute to explain my theory on
Go
this.
for it.
And again, I'm not saying this is it, but this certainly all seems to make sense to myself. During COVID, we were put on furlough for a long time.
Yeah, I remember that. Good old days.
70% of wages were covered by the government.
Yep.
11.7 million of us were put on furlough, and that cost a total of just over £70 billion. Okay?
Okay.
So that's £70 billion that we borrowed, and that does, at some way, have to be paid back. Not arguing against it. However, what I am arguing against is the lack of transparency about how that is being paid back. Now, any government that comes up and says, in order to get you by this, we're going to raise the taxes, knows it is shooting itself in the foot. The one thing that the UK public absolutely hate, that workers hate, is seeing their wages being taken more of from the government.
Yeah.
However, if you increase spending on other areas, how much of your petrol costs are actually tax?
A massive amount.
So if the amount which you're paying on petrol rises, the amount that you're paying in VAT rises as well, doesn't it?
Yep.
So if we have a look at across the board of this inflation rises, of what we're told is being inflation, normal inflation currently is at 10.7 after dropping from the 11.1 high that it had in October of last year.
Okay.
Current UK people, we're experiencing a minus 2.7% earning decrease.
Is that relative to inflation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's real terms. Yeah. But of course, all these other costs have gone up. So as your food inflation is at 16.4%, your food inflation is. Your housing inflation, the costs of rent, etc., is at 26.6%.
Incredible.
So this is all increased VAT payments.
Yeah.
So in fact, what we're now doing is paying the COVID debt by stealth.
Okay.
Rather than it being put onto the corporations like we were all asking. How it should be being paid for is via a windfall tax. If we have a look at the amount of increased profits that these corporations made over that COVID period, it was unprecedented.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna bring some of this stuff back.
That was a lot to take in.
There was a heck of a lot. Okay, so you talked about wages going down 2.4%, and you said that's in real terms.
Real terms.
So
wage.
I'm gonna explain that just for the benefit of our listeners. So if your wages could buy you a certain basket of goods on a particular day or a particular month, and then a year later the cost of those goods has gone up, and your wages have gone up, but the cost of those goods has gone up by more than your wages have gone up, then you can't afford the same basket of goods. And the real term increase or decrease is the difference between what you could buy with your wages and what you can buy with your wages. So what you're saying is the cost of the basket of goods has gone up 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever, depending on what kind of goods you have.
Correct. Your
salary's gone up maybe 5%, 7%, 8%, whatever it is over that period. But actually, because your salary's not gone up by the same amount as the cost of the goods that you want to buy, you're actually only able to consume 95% of what you used to. You're 5% down. That's what you mean by the real term.
At the very least. And what we're going to remember is that what we're talking about here is the averages. Those on the bottom end of these scales will be hit by this a lot harder. Those at the higher end of the economic scales, a lot less.
Yep. Okay. Now your second point, and this is stealth taxation to recoup the money spent during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit skeptical of that.
Course. And you're right to be.
Yeah,
question me as I question the government, and that's all we all can do.
Yeah. So I think there's always the incentive for the government to raise revenue, and they always do taxation stealth, but it's taxation through stealth. They absolutely do that. So I get when they say no new taxes, and then they cancel a taxation credit that they were giving on your pension schemes. This was back in like 2002, where they managed to get an extra 20 to 30 billion pounds for the economy, just through taxation, without actually putting it in, because most people don't know what's happening in their pension fund. So they absolutely always do that. And even if they do, I've generally not got an issue. I got an issue with the lack of transparency, but I don't necessarily have an issue with governments collecting taxes.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
they should. We need taxes to be collected. We all put into the pot and we all take out of it. That's
exactly,
the story
to fund the SNHS and to fund education and so on.
But I would ask, how do you feel about us paying for a pandemic that made the corporations and those who sit at the top of them billions and billions of profit that was unprecedented when compared to the years of non-pandemic?
Yeah. Completely
who
agree.
should be paying for that? Those who were working and making these people the actual profits that they were taking off of their labour? Or those putting in the labour who were putting themselves at risk to make sure that their profits were protected?
So it's really interesting you say that, because that kind of breaks down the different elements of the cost of goods that we buy. And that's the video you shared with me earlier, the Reddit video.
I was hoping you'd bring this up, because I was hoping actually that you'd give a little bit more understanding, because this is a little bit more in your area of expertise.
We'll come on to talk about that. But I just want to say, like, I completely agree with you. There was a period of supernormal profits over the pandemic. And the pandemic was a national and international emergency. And in times of crises, you always get opportunists who want to get rich. And if you look at the figures, at the number of billionaires and the change in their wealth over that pandemic period, it was eye-watering. It was unbelievable. You've got the whole country stuck at home, unable to do anything. And yet billionaires with capital at play were able to double their wealth.
And that money came from other sectors.
Yeah, well, that might,
other classes.
not just other sectors, other classes, but it also came from our taxation revenue, because we're paying the taxes into the economy, into the government treasury, and the treasury is paying massive contracts, billions of contracts for PPE, for track and trace, for dodgy contracts, for everything that was like, we're in almost like a war-like environment where things just need to get done. Let's just sign the contracts. No procurement process, no
pre-qualification.
Review, no pre-qualifications. Yeah, people. We saw with the Brexit where we assigned a contract to a ferry company that owned no ferries.
Yep.
We've assigned multiple. Is it Baroness Monet, who's now been called up, and like there was hundreds of millions of pounds.
She's been called out, but of course she's now put herself in the country without extradition, with the brand new yacht that the taxpayer paid for.
Absolutely unbelievable. So when people say conspiracy theorist, I say no, rubbish to that. Here's some real life examples of stuff that's going on right under our noses and reported. And this is the thing that's most frustrating is all of these things are reported.
It's all in the public domain.
Yeah. And it's like water off a duck's back, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't care. Why do we not care?
Well, you and me certainly do, but I think at the end of the day, it comes back to that hamster wheel as well, doesn't it? Just like we were saying, those people that are paying for it through these stealth taxes are the same people that are working 40 to 8 hours a week to feed their families.
Yep.
That when they get home at the end of the day, who can blame them for just wanting to turn on Strictly Come Dancing and switch off from the rest of the world for a couple of hours and get to sleep and feel recuperated before they have to climb back on that hamster wheel first thing at 6 a.m. the next morning?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Okay, so let's break down the cost of things. The cost of things. So here's a microphone I'm talking into. This microphone's probably cost about 50 odd pounds to purchase. Right? There's a number of elements to what makes up the cost of this microphone. Number one is the wages paid to the staff that actually make it.
Probably one of the biggest costs as well.
You'd expect so.
Yeah.
You'd hope so. Number two is the cost of the materials that were brought together and the cost of transporting those materials to the factory. Number three is the intellectual property, so the technology, the cost of developing the technology in order to build a microphone. And cost number four is the profit margin. So there's an element of, so for anybody that wants to do anything commercially needs a profit. You don't agree with that final part? No. We can talk about that offline.
Of course.
Yeah. But there is, for anybody that goes into business, they want to pay their staff, they want to pay their raw costs, they want to pay their research and development, and they want to make a profit for being in the business in the first place. So have staffing costs gone up? That's a question to you. Have staffing costs gone up over the last 3 years? Would you say staffing costs have gone up?
I'm struggling to think of any evidence I'm aware of to suggest they have. I mean, certainly real-term wages have dropped, haven't they? But the cost of things have gone up in line with inflation. So
if I'm selling this microphone for £40, like I said, but each microphone costs me £30 to make 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was selling it for £40 3 years ago. Now that staffing costs, they haven't gone up, but they've gone up. They've gone a bit, right? Like everybody gets an annual increase of 1%, 2%, 3%.
How many companies said that they weren't increasing wages over COVID?
I'm glad you said that.
So, I mean, it's a great point to make in the normal transition of things of year to year, but we're not in that normal transition. In fact, what we've gone is gone from a pandemic straight into a cost of living crisis where actually all these employers are looking at cutting costs and don't want to raise wages. So nobody's really getting a wage increase without having to really put in a good argument to get it under the current economic landscape.
Okay. So I said that for exactly that reason. I wanted you to call me out on that because this is what people think. People think that year on year, everybody's wages go up 3%, 4%, and then they go up more if they're more qualified. They do some additional courses, get additional qualifications. But they don't. I mean, you've got the teachers on the verge of a strike. You've got the nurses striking.
Teachers haven't had a pay increase for a long time. Nurses haven't had a pay increase for 5 years or something.
Yeah. So there's been 0% increases, literally zero increases for so many people that work in our economy. So if you say, have wages gone up? I'm sure people who make microphones, if they were getting paid £12 an hour last year, they're probably getting paid £12.20 an hour this year or something like that. But there's no way you can say they've gone from £12 to £13. So they've had a decent rise. So, okay.
The workers certainly aren't seeing it in their pockets, are they?
Exactly, yeah. So if the cost of the staff was £30 per microphone, it's probably gone up to about £32.
Okay.
It's fair?
I'll take that,
Yeah. That's less than 10%. It's about
Sure.
6%. So over 2 years, it's gone from £30 to £32. Then you've got the raw materials. The raw materials, let's say £5 of raw materials. Now, there is inflation. There is inflation. We know this. We're seeing this. So the cost of raw materials is probably going up because
in line with inflation.
In line with inflation. So
different in different industries, of course, but we are talking ballpark figures here, aren't we? Let's just make that clear. We know we don't know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about a microphone.
Yeah,
but we could be talking about anything. So if the cost of building the microphone is £5, it's gone up. Let's just say 10%. It's now £5.50. Okay.
Okay.
So what can a company do to the price? If it was originally £40 per microphone, what can the company do to the price in order to protect consumers? Well, it used to cost us 30 plus 5, £35, and our profit was £5, and we used to sell it for £40. Now, our cost of staff has gone up to £32. Our material cost is £5.50. That's £37.50. So either we keep the price exactly the same, and our profit goes down from £5 per unit to £2.50 per unit, which would be a nice thing to do because we've just come out of a pandemic and we're going through a cost of living crisis. So the one thing you could do is really support the community within which you work, the country within which you work, to reduce your profit margin. But no, capitalists are greedy and they want to maintain their profit, if not increase their profit. So let's say they maintain their profit at £5. The price goes from £40 to £42.50. Now that's a 5.5-6% increase. They haven't done that. They've used the war in Ukraine, Brexit, COVID, cost of living crisis, the excuse that everything is going up in price to bump up their profit from £5 per unit to £10 per unit. And the price of the microphone now costs £47.50, which is close to a 20% increase.
I'd say that's a fair analogy you've made there, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a cost of living crisis. That's because the prices of things go up. But the biggest contributor, and then this is the video that you shared, and really, I mean, we should put it out on our socials actually for other people to watch as well. The biggest contributor to the increase in the prices is not the increase in the wage cost, because that doesn't account for a massive amount. And even if it did, it's not gone up anywhere near inflation.
Not as much as inflation, but yet we're seeing rises higher than inflation.
Exactly. And the only thing that's gone up, actually, the only thing that's gone up is dividend payouts for FTSE 100 companies and CEO salary increases. I think you shared something earlier this year about on average there was a 34% increase in CEO pay over the last 2 years. Was it you? It might have been somebody else.
I think it was more than that, but yeah.
Now 34% for the most well-paid people in the country already, and we think
and these are people who by the fourth day of the year have already made as much that year as what their average worker will
so
all
is
year long.
That Fat Cat Monday, isn't it? Is it Fat Cat Monday is the first? So there used to be a Fat Cat Monday, which was the first Monday of the year where the average CEO has earned as much as the average employee in the country would earn over the year. But they've stopped calling it Fat Cat Monday because you didn't have to wait for the next Monday.
Correct.
It's now Fat Cat the third day of the year kind of thing.
Between third and fourth day, around halfway through the third working day of the year, the average CEO has already made as much that year as what the average worker will all year long, yeah.
Okay, we are heading into a break. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I do want to explore the cost of living crisis a little bit more. But before we do, I just want genuinely your thoughts, your feelings over how do you feel about the state of the country, the fact that dividends are shooting up, CEO pay is shooting up, corporate profits are shooting up, and 70-80% of the country is on the verge of poverty.
I don't feel that we live in a country anymore. I feel that we live in a corporate entity called UK PLC. We're all its resources, and we're all here to protect the shareholder dividends of the people that have invested in it. It feels like we're being forced to interact in a giant Ponzi scheme or a giant pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And we're at the bottom. And I'm afraid that if you are one of the people that is now having to rely on a wage rather than asset transfer and asset management, then you're on a downward spiral.
The other thing I wanted to definitely pick your brain on, because I genuinely like your perception of the psychology in people. I really enjoy listening to your take on why people think this. But I was having a chat with somebody, and he's left the corporate world and he's gone self-employed. He's earning a little bit of money, and he likes working 3 days a week. He's got really good mental health as a result of making these choices. But he was shocked at the idea of universal basic income, because he said, "What about the economy?"
Right.
So, have a think about. I mean, what your first initial views? Like, he loves his own peace of mind.
Sure.
And he loves his own mental health. But his response to, well, if the whole country got UBI, everybody be enjoying life like I am. What would happen to the economy? What do you first initial? I like the look on your face, but what's your first initial views?
So, what about it?
Yeah, I mean, he's
literally no. That's my answer. What about it? I mean, this guy has removed himself from that hamster wheel.
Yeah, so he's seen
found
the
he
bigger
has
picture, right?
the great mental health, that he has a work-life balance for the first time in his life,
Which you have to admire.
but he doesn't want anybody else to have it.
Right. We're going to go to a break. Plenty more to talk about, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Do get interested, and we'll be back in 4 minutes.
You're listening to Salam Radio, and it's now time for Isha Azan. This Azan is sponsored by Park Foods. Come and see the difference.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم، وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم بك نحيا وبك نموت وإليك المصير. رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا.
In the heart of Peterborough, this is Salam Radio.
This is indeed Salam Radio 106.2 FM. We're here live, myself, Imtiaz Ali, alongside Alex Blower, talking about the cost of living crisis. Thank you so much for joining us again. We had a bit of a sobering conversation in the 4 minutes that we had during those adverts, and it really is a sad state of affairs.
Isn't it just?
It really is. And it's quite sad to think what the ultimate conclusion to the way in which we are travelling is going, but we're going to continue fighting the good fight, and the good fight is it always starts with education and with information, which is what we're trying to share in this show. So getting back to the cost of living crisis, what I really wanted to do on this show, we've got a comment in from Mike Kenner, which I'm going to read in a second, but what I really wanted to do on this show was talk about what your 40 to 50 hours of a working week buy you and what they cost you. Okay, so let's think about, and I know there's no such thing as an average family, but just why don't you just amuse me for a while.
We do actually have something that we can base this on.
Go on.
So we know, as we said, that earnings growth is down by 2.7%.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
in real terms,
correct. Yeah. Now, one piece of data I am very familiar with is that pre-COVID, the households in the bottom 10% of incomes, if they wanted to follow the NHS healthy eating guidelines, had to spend a whole 74% of their income on food alone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's huge. So that's saying the people who own and earn the least would have to spend 3/4 of it to eat healthily, according to the NHS.
Yeah. To eat the most, and that's the most basic healthy eating guidelines. Yeah,
just like your 5 a day, your vitamins, your minerals, your salt,
that's right,
your calcium.
Yeah, we're not talking avocados and goji berries. We're just talking carrots, mushrooms, the food of the land, and what you can get in your superstores. Now, like I say, that was 74% of their income they were having to spend on food. As we said earlier, food inflation rate currently is at 16.4%. So you can add another 16.4% onto the 76.6%, and you're already over 85%.
And I'm just going to add it just to make it worse as well. So definitely food inflation is at 16%. But the cheapest items in all of the major supermarkets
are the ones that have seen the highest
they've
costs.
seen the highest increase.
And in fact, some supermarkets have even lost their lower brand.
They've got rid of them altogether,
frills, that's right.
So your M&S meal for two that cost like £8, £9 or whatever it was, that's gone up maybe 6 or 7%.
I wouldn't know. I don't shop in M&S, man.
I do every week. Wouldn't go anywhere else. No, but then if you go to like Tesco and you got the Tesco value brands, those have gone up 100%.
Yeah.
Like your cheap pasta, 300 grams of pasta, was costing 45 pence, 50 pence. It's gone up to £1.19. And it's like, if people are spending 25 to 30 pounds on those kinds of items, then those same items are now costing 50 quid. It's doubling your cost because you're buying the cheapest items.
And again, what you're doing, who's buying the cheapest items?
The people with the least amount of money.
So again, it's those that are already in the worst possible situation that we're evidencing here and now are being the most affected by the cost of living crisis.
Yep.
Somebody that was buying those middle ground pasta packets, let's stick with pasta packets, who was paying £1 for a packet.
Yep.
Yeah, great. They're now paying £1.16 for a packet. They are seeing that 16% rise.
Yep.
Somebody who was paying 39p for the no frills, cheap as you like pasta is also now spending £1.19
pretty much.
on their pasta.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Let me just read this comment out from Mike. Thank you, Mike, for getting in touch. Mike says the government line is that wage increases cause inflation. And this is a lie. I think we both agree with that.
Absolutely.
Workers look for increases to compensate for price increases. And they have already experienced these price increases, i.e. compensation for increased expenditure they have already incurred. So that's basically saying, you go out, you do a shop, the cost of your shop goes up, so you want your employer to pay you a little bit more so that you can absorb the increase in the cost.
Yep.
Completely agree with that. As well as this, anybody on average or below average earnings will spend their earnings in day-to-day living. This provides demand and keeps the economy going. If they can't get inflation-related increases, then they can't buy as much and the economy declines. That's an excellent point. And it links very, very closely to something else I think we've talked about, and this is tax breaks for the rich versus handouts for the poor, is what they call it, right? And they'll say, we'll give tax breaks to the rich because it's trickle-down economics. But actually, tax breaks for the rich just means more money in trust funds abroad. Whereas handouts, I wouldn't even like using the word handouts, but those same
and it's
tax breaks,
interesting that difference in terminology,
yeah, exactly,
isn't it?
The exact tax breaks to people who actually spend most of their disposable income or all of it will just mean that they'll buy an extra loaf of bread, they'll buy some more rice, they might buy, they might replace their car tire or whatever it is. They will spend that money because they're living close to the edge. They've not got massive amounts in savings.
Correct.
Whereas if you give additional money to people who've got money, all it means is they've got additional money to save. So completely agree with that, Mike. Thanks so much for the comment. Councillor Nicola Day. Hi, Councillor Nicola Day. I saw earlier today as well. Remember, those cheapest items are not the most organic or healthiest. Excellent point as well. So this is the thing, like, look how disadvantaged the most disadvantaged are. Like, not only do they have the least amount of disposable income, they have the highest hikes in prices for the least, the lowest quality goods that they can get their hands on. So this is what Councillor Day is saying.
So and of course, the lower the value, or the lower the quality of the food you're eating, the lower your health is, the lower your body's defence mechanisms are already, you know, which puts on that cost to society later down the line. And we keep talking about the cost of living crisis, the cost in terms of what it costs us in our pocket as individuals, as families, and the economy. There's another cost here that's the ongoing cost, and the cost that it is to society. I mean, I spoke about pre-COVID, about the cost of families spending on food. Well, also before COVID, 1/3 of adult admissions into hospitals was showing, and I think I mentioned this on a previous show, was showing signs of malnourishment, which means that they cost 3 times more to treat. It takes them 3 times longer to treat, so they're filling up beds for 3 times as long. Now factor that into the fact now that our lowest economic families, who were already having to spend 74% of their household income on food to eat healthily, now cannot, I mean, they've got no chance of eating healthily. So they're going to be iller. They're going to be more susceptible to virus, to bacteria. Their children are going to perform less in schools because the eating means that they're concentrating less, that they're less likely to sit still. They're going to be more irritable. They're going to get into trouble more and hold less information. So the cost to society of the cost of living crisis is just nowhere even being realised, let alone being truly, truly spoken about in the media of what it's going to mean to us, not now, but in years to come.
Okay. We've talked a lot about the problems. The cost of living crisis is a problem. It's a massive problem. Well, I've got 1 or 2.
Okay, good, because I have no solutions.
So Alex is saying, don't even veer this towards the solution to cost of living crisis. And I mean, no, it's not. I mean, it's not solutions. Of course, it's not solutions. I'm not going to sit here and say I know how to solve. That's just pathetic to say that. I'm just saying there's ways in which we can cushion it, and ways in which we can transfer the power from the corporate interests to the everyday people on the street.
Absolutely, and I think that's where we need to be, isn't it? I mean, we need to start organising and coming together and making a noise about this. So
this is where I want to bring up something which I know is very close to your heart. This is the cooperative models of business.
Sure.
Okay. So there's, I think for most people, and I talked to you about the UBI example that my cousin, he was like, well, what about the economy? But I think for most people, but if you disagree, for most people, it's too much of a mental stretch to imagine a country where there aren't corporate interests.
Yeah.
Because all we've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime, the only thing I've ever seen is people investing in a company that's going to develop a good or a service, sell it, make a profit, buy a nice house, buy a nice car off the back of the raw goods, the materials and the labor and the profit margin. And that's the only world I've ever seen. So rather than saying, right, let's get shot of that, socialist straight away, your government owns everything and there's no concept of a profit. I don't think we can move there overnight. Let's move there slowly. And the number one thing I would say is insist that any company that has taxable profits of over £1 million a year, you insist that they are owned by their employees to an extent.
Yeah.
So
so
let's take
with increasing investment being put back into employee shares year on from the profits.
exactly that. And even if you don't do that, even if you don't, I mean, that's ideal. Again, that's even closer to ideal. But even if you don't, let's just say you have a really small amount. Let's say 10%. I've just thought 10%. You've got the FTSE 100. That's worth God knows how much. It's worth close to $1 trillion, right? If you say all the profits generated from the FTSE 100 companies, 10% of those are going to go to the workforce in proportion to the salaries they are paid. So the more important top level strategic managers with great skills or whatever it is, expert programming or whatever, they're on a higher salary. They're on £60,000 a year. The more low level workers, less skilled, maybe less experienced, more new entrants, whatever, they're on maybe, say, £20,000 a year. The person on 60,000 gets 3 times the bonus as the person on 20,000. I know that's not fair, but what it does mean is 10% of the value of the whole stock market is now owned by the people employed by those companies.
The people working in it. The people putting the value of the stock market where it belongs,
And I feel, and this is probably one where you might argue with me, you might not, I feel it's got to be a snapshot decision. It needs to be whoever's working there today and all future employees. But the moment you work there, you've got a stake in that company for life. Do you understand? Because what happens is, over time, companies become more efficient, less staff dependent.
Of course.
Yeah, cashless registers in supermarkets. Now we're seeing driverless cars. We're seeing robot deliveries. There's all this automation going on. Staff costs are becoming a lower and lower proportion of company profits. And company profits are getting bigger and inflating at a higher rate. All it's doing is it's screwing the working class. It's screwing the people who rely on having to sell their labour for money.
So what you're also, I suppose, suggesting here is that these opportunities for working class to pull themselves out of where they are currently are going to be less and less and less as we move forwards as well. More
if we
into
don't
this
do
model.
this now,
yes,
and we do this next year, we've already missed, 50,000 people.
Yeah,
right?
so
and if we do it in 5 years, we've missed, 500,000, 1 million.
Yeah.
Who knows? And absolutely, day by day by day, the way the technology is going, pretty much, if you can roboticize it, is that a word? Roboticize?
Automate.
Yeah, if you can automate something, you will. Because if it costs you £100,000 a year in labour cost, but it costs you £500,000 to automate, you'll pay the £500,000 knowing in 5 years you get a return on your investment.
And with no attrition through illness, sick days, etc.
No sick days, no nothing like that, no mental health issues, no need to develop a relationship with your employee, no paternal instinct to protect your employee.
Up and downs with
like
efficiency, you know what it's going to produce, how many it's going to do per minute, per second even.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking, have a think about where we're going as a country and as an international community.
Yeah, it sounds to me that you're actually coming at this from quite a Marxist perspective.
I don't know if I am or not.
I would suggest that what you're arguing for is for the masses to seize the means of production before we truly enter the age of AI.
I would like to say that this is original thought. So it's either Marxist or Aliist.
Right. Yep.
Because I'm arrogant like that. But no, I agree. I don't disagree with what you've just said. You've quoted, obviously, Karl Marx. Seize the means of control. Why not? What's the alternative?
Exactly. Fight in a desert wasteland over the scraps that they throw out from their penthouse suites, whilst they carry on betting that the flames don't quite reach them.
Okay, so this is where you'll lose a lot of people.
Sure.
Based on what you've said. And I can see the steps between. But how is it? How could you say that that's where we're? Because I agree with you.
I don't see the alternative. Let's just have a look at what you were talking about just then about working class jobs being automated more and more and more, and we can see it in Tesco's, for example, as checkouts are replacing staff.
But also, barcodes.
Yep.
Barcodes on pallets can be scanned by automatic forklifts. And they know where to stock them in the flipping warehouse.
There's Amazon warehouses out there that hardly have any staff whatsoever now, where goods literally are unloaded off of the lorry and go out the other end via drones.
Just think 20 years ago, there used to be a truck that used to come.
Yep.
They used to use forklifts. Okay, they used to use forklifts 20 years ago.
Just to get them offloaded.
And then there used to be humans that would think, where does this go? Where does this go? Where does this go? Right, and there was people that were sorting, there was people that were carrying, there were people that were stacking, people that were restocking the shelves. All of those have gone. Other than maybe they're restocking the shelves because you need fine motor skills. But I promise you, when they get a forklift that's got fine motor skills and some kind of radar ability to know how far back they need to stack in shelves, then when the store is closed from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., they'll have robots floating around and restocking all the shelves. Guaranteed.
And we're seeing this across pretty much all industries in general. I mean, of course, there will always be certain industries where it doesn't. Maybe some things like healthcare, especially palliative and home care, you know. But as a general rule, this is what we are seeing, more and more automation. And it is the lower paid jobs which are being automated, yeah?
I went into the hospital with my brother a couple of months ago, and he had some blood tests, and they needed to do the blood test somewhere in a particular department where he was being held, and they had to be checked somewhere else. And it was amazing because they took the bloods and they put the vials in the safe box, and then they just opened a chute, put the bag in there, and it's gone. And I'm like, that's great technology, and I'm glad that his bloods are going to be looked at quicker. But that used to be an employee that used to have to rush those across, no longer required. So even with the healthcare, like there's going to be, and the way the Peterborough City Hospital is sprawled, that's ideal for little robots transporting things from one place to the next, because you've got wide corridors, you've got automated doors, you know, and you just need to program a robot to take these X-ray scans to the consultant who sat over there. And
so what we're evidencing is, as a rule, less and less jobs, less and less opportunity for self-mobility.
I'm just going to read this comment from Mike, because I think it's relevant to exactly what we're talking about. Companies experimenting with a 4-day week find that productivity increases, which is excellent. Why not extend this to a 3-day week with automation? By the way, when I first read Lenin, I was surprised at how much he agreed with me.
He agreed with me.
Nice, Mike. Nice. Yeah. This is Kennardisms.
Yes.
This is what this is. Absolutely brilliant. So, and my company as well, actually, my company floated the idea of a 4-day week because, so what I do, some people might not know, I work in life insurance. And one of the things you've got to do is make sure you've got enough money to pay those claims when they fall due. And what they used to do back in the day, they used to have paper files. So you can imagine how many staff you needed to sort those files, to open those files, to use like there's like a punch card system to see how many premiums they'd paid and what their policy might be worth and how much money and then their valuation would take 3 months. They'd do a quarterly valuation and literally spend 3 months saying, this is how much money we should have had 3 months ago. Let's save that. Now let's do another valuation. This is how much money we should have had 3 months ago. Now we could do a valuation in like a week because we've got computer systems and we've probably got half the staff. So all that money saved has been spent on technology that's already paid its way back and has been going to shareholders.
Increased profits.
Yeah. And you need fewer people. So either you continually do fewer and fewer people, get more and more automation, more and more robotics in the workplace, or you say, we're at this tipping point now where we're literally going to have to think about having a permanent underclass of people that are never employed, because we don't need them, because we can consume as much as we want by this fully automated situation where we've got robots and AI doing everything.
And this is where the conversation gets interesting, I think, isn't it? And where it really touches on a little conversation we had before the show and maybe in the break about what are you going to do with all those people? If they should be alive, who is it that would be expected to pay for them? And if we have a look at these people's past records at paying for things that they don't believe they should have to, do we expect them to pay for these people?
I really don't want to take the show there. It's
a very dark place to go, isn't it?
The show
and
there.
what I find you're touching on the notion of is capitalist-driven eugenics based upon economic value placed on people.
How do you stop that?
I have no idea. Well, I think your argument was there, wasn't it? And it is back to the working classes having to seize some form of the means of production.
How do you convince people that if they don't demand ownership of their company, and I'm not saying 100%, like people feel like that's theft, and I'd have to say all the current landlords, massive landlords, they stole the land that they're now landlords of 1,000 years ago. 1066, wasn't it? Battle of Hastings. Post then, all the closest friends of the king got allocated counties, and you've got the Earl of Sussex and the Duke of Yorkshire.
And then carried on through various land acts through the time, you know. And
Exactly.
if anybody really wants to try and understand that, whoever has the most land has the most power. It really can't be that much of a simple equation, almost.
Yeah.
Go away and do some research and see who has all the land in
Who has
the
all
UK
the land?
and who owns it, and then see if you can figure out how they got it.
I want to do a show on that. I want to do a show on land ownership and taxation. I know it's not going to be the most interesting, but I think we'll certainly bring it into one of the shows.
And let's get back to what your question
Go
was.
on.
You were asking about how you demand that. And you as a person, you don't do it individually. You have to do it through mass organisation. You have to do it through mass negotiation, which is what we're seeing in the unions.
Yeah.
Join a union. If your workplace doesn't have one, start speaking to your other people, especially if you're in a corporation. But we have to keep having these conversations, Imtiaz, even if it is just through radio shows like this. If you've listened to this and you're going in for a coffee tomorrow, have these conversations in the workplace.
But would you mind if I just take a couple of minutes to outline what this would mean to employees?
Yeah.
Okay, so I understand my company quite well because I work for them. And my company's worth, it's listed on the FTSE 100, and it's worth about £5 billion, right? And it's on a PE ratio, a price to earnings ratio. So how much profit does it generate versus how much it's worth, of about 10, which means it's worth 5 billion because every year it makes about 500 million pounds in profits. Okay? So every year it's making 500 million pounds in profits. Now, based on what I said, like, can employees demand a 10% stake in the company?
In fact, no, I don't believe they can. And I'm going to say that you're not going to be able to do this internally in your own organisations, possibly. And even if you could, who are you leaving behind in every organisations? There's a lot of events that are going to be happening throughout the summer. Mass actions, protests, marches on London.
Okay.
That's where we need to see numbers on the street. If you're not angry by now, you bloody well should be. If you've listened to this show and you weren't angry at the start of it, you should be by the end of it.
I know
Channel that anger somewhere. Find a way. The people that are doing this currently are not being held to account. Somebody might have realised, and I'm not championing people going out there and causing damage to public places, but Paul Bristol seemed to get very, very upset with somebody putting a bit of graffiti up in Peterborough this
Tories.
week.
Apparently somebody said Tories.
And for me, the traction that got when he put it back just shows how many other people you have out there, if you're listening, as comrades who are also angry. That man expected sympathy, but the public are well aware of what this system is doing to everybody, and all he got was a kick in the teeth.
Okay, so mass action, absolutely. But I'm sorry, I have to come back. There was 3 million people that went out to protest against the war in Iraq.
There was,
2001. Yeah. The biggest post-war demonstration, the biggest ever probably demonstration in the UK, and it didn't change a thing.
Right. However, let's have a look at what happened in 2008. In 2008, there was a global financial crash.
Yes.
As the rest of the capitalist countries threw the cost of this onto homeowners and allowed banks to take homes
taxation
off of families, whilst the bankers who had caused the crash were given bonuses.
Yeah.
One country went against this bulk, and that was Iceland.
Okay.
What it took was a whole 10% of that country involved in mass action for 7 days. Okay, 10%. I believe if we had 10%,
what was the result?
The result was the bankers got thrown in jail, and the homeowners' houses were protected.
So that was the only country in the world that imprisoned the people who committed the crime that cost the country.
And it was also the only country whose people got up in mass action and stood against that decision by the government. So if you want to know how to change it, I'd say there's your blueprint right there.
Okay, so Councillor Nicholas Day's come in and said you can work in a moderate flank way within organisations and companies. And this is, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to explore this. So if the company's making £500 million in profits and employees join a union and demand employee ownership, then you're talking, let's just say they ask for 10%. And 10%, I could probably that's probably the extent to which you could argue it. I mean, obviously owners won't give you anything, but if they did, what does that do? That reduces the value of the asset by 10% because if you buy a share in it, you only own 90% of it now. But that would mean £50 million per annum to the employees that work in the company.
Certainly make a difference during a crisis like this, wouldn't it?
And then there's 5,000 people that work in that company. So if it was just a flat amount, you're talking £10,000 per person per annum,
Yeah.
which is huge.
Yeah, it was. There was actually discussion about a policy similar to this in Sweden back in the 70s.
You're serious?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, send me links because I need to read
I
about this.
will. I'll have to read up about it again.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
I remember it rightly, what they were saying was that any corporation with a turnover over a certain amount
Yeah.
or a profit margin over a certain amount had to put increasing amounts of profits back into shareholder options for the employees.
Good.
Yeah, and that was on an increasing scale as well. So over time,
Yeah.
it would become more and more owned by the employees.
Brilliant, because if it was growing as a company, then more of that growth should be allocated to the employees.
Yeah.
Because they're driving it.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Listen, we've run out of time, and I feel like we've not really done this subject justice because the cost of living crisis is really about the cost of food, the cost of energy, the cost of electricity, the fact that it's making a pitch point. So we need to revisit this, and I'm sure we will.
We do. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there as well that are listening to this worrying how they're going to feed their kids this week, worrying how they're going to top up their gas meters, their electric meters, and I don't think we've really gone as far as we could. We've given them a voice
I think
this
so.
evening
I
as
agree.
well.
I agree.
So just to those people, we do hear you, and we do know that you're out there.
Yeah, there's plenty of stories of people who are struggling. There's plenty of help available as well, and we probably should have signposted that a little bit better. But
Yeah,
get in
please have a
touch
look
with
at the page from the show tonight. I will post links of what help is available throughout the Peterborough area
Yeah.
sometime this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys, and we
Thank
will
you.
be back again.